All right, we're going to try this one more time. I've already tried recording this a couple of times, and I don't know. I'm having a hard trouble finding a good medium between rant and review because I do want to rant about this for a little bit, and hopefully that'll be acceptable. So I just finished reading, and by just I mean I read it on Saturday. I read this, All Systems Red by Martha Wells. It is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries series. This was another book that I found when I went on Amazon and looked specifically for hard science fiction, because I wanted to see what hard science fiction was selling, what people were looking for, what people were writing, what was popular. I wanted to get an idea of this. The other example from that list was that horrible The Object book. And, well, I'm gonna tear into this a little bit, but before I do, I just want to say it's not bad. It's just incredibly mediocre. It's it's not like I was expecting it to be bad. I've actually heard good things about this book. I heard that it's kind of like a mystery from the point of view of like a self-hacking killing machine. And that sounded kind of appealing and interesting. And part of what tempered my my hopes for it was seeing the Hugo and Nebula Award winner thing. And then on the inner thing, it also says it's an Alex and Locus winner. Now, here's where the rant comes in. If I were somehow magically, in charge of one of these awards for speculative fiction, for science fiction, I would probably reserve that reward for something that actually had a cool or new idea, and did a good job of presenting it. I assume that there was one such work in the English language science fiction, arena in 2017, but apparently it didn't win any of these awards. This novella did. It's one of those things where I'm not saying that there can't be good yeoman work in science fiction, adventure stories that are not super creative, but at least, kind of push on the things that science fiction readers like, and while not incredibly creative or like groundbreaking, or at least interesting and fun reads, and create a semi-interesting science fiction world for you to kind of lose yourself in a little bit. This book doesn't do any of that. When I was first writing the notes for this review, I was going to call it a Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep fanfiction. And then I have a long, not very interesting history with that story and Blade Runner, the movie that was based on it, right? I watched Blade Runner, the director's cut, not the one with the horrible monologues. But I rented a VHS tape, not rented, I borrowed a VHS tape from the library of the director's cut back in probably 1999, 1998, something like that. And I watched it once, and part of it may have been the low quality of the VHS tape, kind of making it so that all of the cool visual splendor that happens in that movie was completely lost on me. And part of it also is the as I've said before, I'm just really not a huge fan of depressing science fiction. I like my science fiction to have at least a hint of optimism that humanity can do things a little bit better, be a little bit freer, in the future, have some cool technology that does some things that make our lives better, stuff like that. And so I read this, and I was going to call it a Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep fanfiction. And I said to myself, well, you know what? I had that bad experience with Blade Runner. Not bad, but it's just like, it's just not, and I don't want to minimize in any way the actual technical and acting and, physical work that went into Blade Runner. Like, I recognize that the movie is a marvelous piece of art. My previous recording, I basically said, yeah, I've never really felt like spending the $13 to get a copy from Amazon and watch that. But I actually did do that yesterday. I sat down and I watched the final cut of Blade Runner last night. And like, in 1080p, in my comfortable room, with my nice TV, it's very clear that a ton of very incredible work was done to make that movie. It's clear that there was a lot more of like a noir influence on the movie as compared to the story. It is indeed a very important and well-made movie that just happens to be a little bit outside my taste. I think some of the dialogue in it is a little clunky at times, but there's enough good stuff in that movie that I think that we can that I don't want to. I'm not trying to minimize that. And the other issue is that I had never actually read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and so on Sunday, so today's Tuesday, I read this on Saturday, I read Do Androids on Sunday, and I watched Blade Runner on Monday. That's where we're at here, right? Because I was gonna make a joke about it being Do Androids fanfiction, and I came to the conclusion that it's actually closer to Blade Runner fanfiction than Do Androids fanfiction, because I read Do Androids for the first time on Sunday, and holy crap, that story is incredibly well written. Like, the prose in it is beautiful. The tension is... every scene where there should be a little bit of tension drips with it. There's incredibly neat little, like, science fiction, speculative fiction ideas in the story that are not in Blade Runner, that are themselves interesting science fiction ideas that I think were reasonably novel at the time. Humanoid Androids was not super novel, but, Phillip K. Dick did some fun things with it, right? And so it turns out that I'm not going to call this book Do Androids fanfiction. I'm going to call it Blade Runner fanfiction, because it's not even as interesting as Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and it's not as interesting as Blade Runner. It's kind of like someone took Blade Runner, said, what if we turn the point of view around a little bit and make a novella based on that, and not even particularly do a very good job of it, right? Like, Blade Runner, the movie, is a technical masterpiece, right? Masterpiece, right? This is not... The prose in this is mediocre at best. It just gets you there. It's functional, but it's not interesting or like mind-blowing at any point. I mean, this is yeoman's work, right? It's mediocre, it's not bad, but it's not anything that I'm like, ooh, there's something cool here. Whereas, I read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and I'm like, holy crap, there's more creativity in the first chapter of Do Androids than there is in this entire freaking book. Why do I make this statement? Why do I call it this? The point of view character, we're getting onto the review now a little bit. I'm done-ish ranting, maybe. But, like, the point of view character is basically a replicant. We're seeing from the point of view of a replicant, not one that is necessarily fully rogue, but one that's kind of partly rogue. What it has done is it's hacked its own governor module so that if it disobeys orders, it can't be punished, automatically. And it is protecting, or it has been rented or leased to protect a group of people that are surveying a planet. The first thing that happens in the story is basically that this giant animal creature attacks a couple of the people who are the surveyors, and our POV character, who I guess I'll call Murderbot, goes out and helps them and tries to pull them to safety, and manages to succeed in pulling them to safety. One of them is very badly injured, the other one's kind of hurt. The Murderbot gets damaged too, pretty badly. And this action, this event of this giant creature attack, basically leads into a larger conspiracy where, there's certain people that are trying to, basically get rid of surveyors on this planet for some particular reason, which I'm not going to, spoil any of that stuff, but kind of, it grows into that kind of a story. Now, what are the good things about this book? The good things are that the point of view perspective of Murderbot is mildly entertaining. Murderbot is detached, Murderbot is aloof, Murderbot is sardonic. Murderbot doesn't really care about the people it's supposed to be protecting. The way that the story is written is kind of in a stream of consciousness with a very fast flow. And this is good in the sense that it keeps you turning pages, but it's bad in the sense that sometimes it's too fast of a flow. There are action scenes in this story, and they're, how to describe it? It's gone over. The action scenes are gone over so quickly and with so little detail that it feels like they've been glossed over. And we're back to sardonic Murderbot talking about how it would rather watch TV than save people. Fine. But again, this is a major flaw in the writing for a book that contains action to gloss over the action. There's some very minor gore, which is kind of the only time that things slow down, is when the Murderbot is talking about how parts of it are dripping, red liquid, and it knows that people don't like to see that, and so it's kind of embarrassed to be around people. And the basic characteristic of this thing is that it's very it would much rather watch television dramas than actually save people or protect people or do work, which is the only real sense of character development that we get, is that we find out, over the course of the story that in some areas it will actually stop watching TV and help people if it can be properly motivated. As far as being hard science fiction, there's not really anything in here that I would consider to be even an element of hard science fiction. We have kind of a humanoid robot with cyborg bits. It's better. We understand that in the world of this story there are humans, there are augmented humans, and then there are units. And the units are basically very, very highly modified, very, very highly augmented humans who have also been kind of indoctrinated in such a way that they don't know a whole lot, and they've also, generally speaking, been under the influence of a governor, which automatically punishes them if they violate orders. That's not a new idea. There's nothing new about that. Space travel. They briefly mention a wormhole. It's like a 2-sentence thing somewhere in the book where they talk about that's how they're getting from planet to planet. There's no more detail than that. That's not hard science fiction. The setting is another one of those tired mega corporation makes everything bad settings, which is incredibly boring, and it makes me just wish someone would read some economics that aren't based in Keynes or Marx. It's like we have mega corporations today, and you can buy a Ford Focus or you can buy a Ford Explorer. It is not true that when corporations have, the run of things, that you everything goes to the lowest possible, barely works but reliably works situation. Like, you can usually, corporations want profit, and so you can usually pay them for improvements on things. And it's just this whole, I don't know, it's one of these setting issues that I see so often that it just kind of, always turns me off a bit. I've already kind of mentioned the plot. It's a fairly basic plot. There's not a whole lot going on. My initial understanding of the book was that it's kind of a mystery or a whodunit. Unfortunately, there's a mystery about who the antagonist is for a little bit, but not for very long, and it's not one of those things where someone makes a cool leap of logic or an interesting deduction that leads to the answer of who the antagonist is. The antagonist is out in the open, so even as a whodunit, as a mystery, this book fails. The main character, the Murderbot, being a piece of, basically leased hardware, is mostly along for the ride and there to kind of provide an opportunity for the humans in the story, the protagonist humans, to have a possibility of success against other Murderbots, basically. The developments in the story are fairly predictable. If I asked you to guess what happens in the story and gave you 3 to 5 guesses, you'd probably get most of it. As far as the setting having a lot of pessimism to it, which again, that's not the kind of thing that I like very much. There is one minorly optimistic element that I think is worth at least highlighting, is that this is a murder bot that has hacked itself so that it is no longer under control, yet it still decides that there are some humans that are worth, keeping around. So there's kind of your very, 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 very narrow silver lining for that one, which is, it's like, okay, well, that's at least a little bit optimistic. I mean, overall, this is All Systems Red is a mediocre read with a couple of good points, but a lot of negative points. It has a largely unsympathetic point of view character, which means that I don't feel invested in anything that's going on for the most part. They have actively tried to prevent me from becoming invested in these characters. The setting is tired. There's no sense of wonder or exploration. We don't actually get to see the surveying team discover anything cool. There's no lead up. We just start with, oh, giant monster. Oh, someone's trying to kill us. Oh, blah, 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 blah. There's nothing really that interesting there. And in fact, from the point of view character, from Murderbot, we kind of rule out wonder or exploration because Murderbot isn't interested in any of that stuff. Murderbot just wants to watch television shows. It's not a bad story. The prose is functional, right? It gets you, it keeps moving, and it gets you to keep turning pages for a relatively short book, right? And we're talking novella. It's 150 pages of text like that. It's not too crazy, but like it's basically kind of a mediocre Blade Runner fan fiction, and there's not really much more to it than that. And it's just one of those things that surprises me and kind of discourages me that there wasn't anything that had a new idea or an interesting idea in 2017, and so they gave the Hugo and Nebula Award to this. It's functional, but it's predictable. It doesn't really have any new ideas in it. Okay, so actually, there's one kind of neat idea which isn't really new or anything special, but the murder bots are, what do you call it? They're human. They're basically human. They're basically cyborgs. If you put clothes on one and cover up the guns that are attached to its arm and take off its helmet, then it can look like an augmented human. Is what Wells describes it as. And that is the kind of thing where there's enough organic parts where you'd imagine that, damage to the murder bot is really a big deal. But they basically have this thing that they describe as a cubicle, which allows their murder bot to repair itself, even its organic parts, in a relatively short time span from relatively, catastrophic damage. You go from totally torn up to reasonably good shape in 8 hours, which, there's no details about how that works or anything. So there's no real hard science element to it, or not even an attempt at one, but it's at least another cool little science bit that's in there. That's part of the setting. I don't know. It is a functional work. It is a mediocre read that you can sit down and you can go through and you can waste an hour and a half or 2 hours and be like, cool, that was a decent story. But once you actually start to think about it and start to judge it versus other science fiction that it's cribbing from, you get kind of angry, or at least I did. Because, I read this and I said, oh, I'm going to call it Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep fanfiction. And I was like, you know what? I never read that. Maybe I should read that. Then I sat down and, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is longer than this. And it's way more gripping, has way more interesting ideas, has more, interesting speculative science fiction elements to it, even has some cool, societal science fiction elements to it that don't appear in Blade Runner. Basically, reading this book got me to read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and that is the best thing I can say about this book. So that's where we're at. Hopefully this is a good enough recording to put up for this book. I mean, there has to have been one original idea in 2017, and they give awards to this instead. It's just kind of confounding. frustrating, I guess, because I don't claim to necessarily have particularly like creative ideas, but I can at least recognize them when I see them. You know, and Yeoman's science fiction work is perfectly fine, but it isn't. It's not. It's not something that you like say, "Oh, this is the most amazing thing of the year," when like somebody may have had some cool idea about like a future religion or some kind of scientific advancement that somebody must have, right? In all of English science fiction, English written science fiction, there wasn't a single unique idea in 2017. I'm not sure I believe that. Anyway, we'll call this here. I'm trying to work on another like lessons from my first novel video, but it's taking a little bit more time than I thought. Yeah, like definite mixed feelings about this book. If you're thinking about reading this book, go read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. You will enjoy that a lot more. I don't know. I mean, if you like the really tired, pessimistic megacorp setting, maybe you'll like this book. If you like sarcasm a lot and you think sarcasm is the greatest development in human writing, then maybe you'll like this book because there's a lot of that, of like not necessarily sarcasm, but just kind of like that weird like detached aloofness that some people seem to really enjoy. Like I half expected the Murderbot to lapse into like Valley Girl terminology at some point. With the way it was like, oh my god, I can't believe it. Anyway, I'll probably do a review, a full talk about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep at some point, because I think that story is way more worth talking about than this one. So look forward to that, I guess. That's what I can say. Anyway, have a good rest of your week, and we'll see if I have another good video. Not good, but see if I have another video up this week. I might. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Oh yeah, bonus. This is the picture on the inside dust cover. Like Martha Wells looking up in the sky. And it's like, you're not Gene Roddenberry. Screw that. All right, we're out. See you later.